Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Demon Podcast, here with your friend Victor. Today we have quite an episode. It's probably going to be another short one, but I wanted to start off with some bad, or actually I shouldn't even say bad, more like sad news. Unfortunately, Sky will be stepping down as the co-host of the Demon Podcast to focus on other priorities in her life. And the reason that I say this is more of sad news than bad news is that we as individuals just never really know what really is good or bad in terms of individual events. We can always label individual events as good or bad depending on how they make us feel at that moment, but we never really know what path those events are going to lead us down. We don't know what doors those events are going to open. For example, losing your job, however horrible and unfulfilling it might be, might initially be a bad thing. We all need a source of income to survive and to provide us with the necessities we need to be happy. But if, as a result of you losing that job, it forces you to go out and seek for a new one, and this new job pays more and it makes you happier, was that event really bad from like a big picture perspective? I think most people would say no. Or at least say that it's something that was necessary for them to achieve this new elevated state of fulfillment in life. Marrying someone you love might initially seem like a good thing, but if this person later turns out to be abusive or just not a good person, how good was that decision to marry them? And again, I want to stress, we as individuals have limited information, and consequently, a limited big picture perspective. This is why I never really put too much emphasis on singular events or things of this nature. These type of inflection points in our lives sometimes lead to places we never imagined we'd go down or find ourselves in. One thing that I always try to remember and keep in my mind is that life is not happening to me. Life is happening for me, as long as I have the right perspective. And this applies to anybody else. Life is not happening to you. It is happening for you. You just need to have the right perspective. Everything is in constant flux, and the future is uncertain. Not really being, but becoming. So enjoy and make the most of things while they last, but learn when to let go and move on. So with that philosophical Buddhist mumbo jumbo, I do wish Sky the best moving forward, and I hope our time working on this project provided her with something of value. Thank you, Sky. And of course, with Sky stepping down, there are probably more changes that are going to be coming to the podcast, especially for me, just because I got so used to the conversational part of the podcast where now I have trouble filling the air. And maybe that's why I decided to go down to 30 minutes, because talking about things, especially about politics for an hour, is boring to even me. So I'm definitely still gonna be talking about politics, but I may also take more of a personal kind of blogging, I don't know what the term of blogging would be for like podcasting. I guess it is just podcasting, aspect to the podcast, especially because I have some pretty big changes coming to me as well in the next couple of months. As I've previously mentioned, I do have plans to move to Mexico for a while, and my mom has recently decided to join me on this trip, at least initially. We do plan on going to our home state of Durango once we are both vaccinated, obviously, because we want to reduce, or I guess mitigate, the risk of infecting anybody or infecting ourselves. We're still obviously going to be taking the precautionary measures that are espoused by the CDC, the Mexican health organizations, basically wearing a mask, trying to social distance, etc. But that unfortunately won't be coming for at least another 2 months, hopefully not too much longer after that. Because according to Fauci, most people should be able to get vaccinated in around April, May-ish, and that's when we'll probably plan our getaway. But in terms of actual changes to the podcast, I do have some plans to maybe do a Spanish episode here and there, primarily because I do want to increase my fluency in Spanish. I can obviously speak it, but I lack the same terminology or vocabulary that I have in English, which is a little burdensome, especially because when I try to communicate ideas in Spanish, they are not as, I guess, concise or as clear as I would like them to be. So I think that's something that would be good practice for me in general. But I actually have a few other friends in Mexico that might be interested in something like a podcast. So I'm going to approach them and see if they would be interested in joining me as guests or as a possible co-host, depending on how well we flow with each other and mesh, I guess. Additionally, I may actually start doing bi-monthly episodes, which would be an episode every other week, just because sometimes it is a little hard to fill in the areas I was saying. But this is something that I'm actively combating and trying to improve at by introducing other topics or by talking about my personal life a little bit more. So we'll see how this goes. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys would like for me to talk about. And yeah, we'll go from there, I guess. Another really good idea that I've been kind of swirling around in my head is this concept of like vlogging about my life in Mexico and just about like me in general. Just because I do want my family to see the things that I'm seeing in Mexico and just kind of follow me along on that adventure. And for anybody else that's actually interested, I think certain aspects or certain concepts are better translated with video and audio as opposed to just audio on this podcast. And again, I think these are going to be two separate things that I'm going to try to juggle at the same time and see how it goes. But anyways, we'll talk about more of those things as they continue to develop. But on to the politics. It looks like the $15 minimum wage is not going to go through with the $1.9 trillion relief package as the Democrats were initially expecting, which does not mean that they're going to stop fighting for the $15 minimum wage. But as previously stated in the last episode, I believe, there were some issues or some questions being raised about something like the minimum wage being passed through reconciliation, which would mean that they would just have to pass it through regular legislation. And that may complicate things a bit, as we've seen how much the Republicans hate increasing the material conditions of their constituents, let alone the rest of the country. But safe to say that they will continue to fight for this and hopefully pass it through some other means. Now, if the Democrats really wanted to and be ballsy, they could actually still include this in the bill and send it up to the Senate, at which point the Republicans would obviously object. But since it's being passed through reconciliation, they would need 60 votes to actually reject that legislation, which again, it's a 50-50 split with the vice president being the deciding vote, which would mean that it would obviously pass. The thing is, the Democrats think this would be a little bit too partisan and too norm-breaking. Norm-breaking like when Mitch McConnell blocked Obama's Supreme Court nominee, because apparently it is the norm to not seat a Supreme Court justice on election year. Yet, he called for the nomination of Amy Coney Barron, or whatever the fuck her name is, literally days before the elections in 2020, if you guys remember. So it confuses me why the Democrats are so concerned with the norm and not appearing too partisan when Republicans literally don't care. They are there to take the W by any means necessary, the country and Democrats be damned. And I wish that Democrats in this instance would take that similar approach. And to add a little bit of context here, let's say that Obama would have gotten that Supreme Court seat. And let's also say that RBG wouldn't have died in 2020, which would have made the Supreme Court justice majority liberal. Mitch McConnell would not hesitate for a second to pack the court. Because packing the courts is not illegal. It's still a process that you have to fight for, but it is not technically illegal to increase the size of the Supreme Court. Now, if you guys remember, during the election cycle, a lot of people were speculating whether Biden would actually pack the courts, and a lot of people were asking him. And Republicans were going nuts over the possibility that this might happen, saying that it was illegal, that it was norm-breaking, blah, blah, blah. It's not illegal. It would be norm-breaking, But again, Republicans are not scared to break the norm. That is something that I actually admire in them because I also like to break the norms here and there. But yeah, it's just completely bogus, and it's just a show that a lot of people unfortunately fall for. But again, these are actions, these are things, these are strategies that Republicans will not hesitate to use, and that for some reason, Democrats sometimes don't like to entertain. And I understand that two wrongs don't make a right, but this is a decision that would lift so many people out of poverty. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. I'm going to have to read into it a little bit more to see what the nuances there are. But man, one thing that immediately comes to mind is the immigration bill that they are also going to have to pass through regular legislation, which means that they need 10 senators from the Republican side, along with all 50 Democratic senators. Maybe there is some political capital that has to be expended there as opposed to the $15 minimum wage. So you pass this bill through reconciliation, I'm not going to vote on that immigration bill for you. I'm not sure if these are the games that are being played, but I know these games are the ones that are played in politics. So I guess we'll find out soon enough. Senator Bernie Sanders has also proposed to increase the minimum wage through other means, mainly by taxing corporations that make over a certain amount that aren't paying their employees $15 or more. So that's another alternative that they can go down, but we'll continue to follow this and report on its developments. But changing gears a little bit, the House recently passed the Equality Act in a victory for LGBT Americans or LGBTQ plus Americans. But like everything good in the world, there is still questions about whether it's going to pass in the Senate, especially because the bill has been introduced 4 times in its current form since 1974. But it has been opposed and struck down on grounds of religious freedom to discriminate. And quite honestly, based on Rand Paul's recent transphobic remarks and Marjorie Greene Taylor in the House, I mean, it's probably going to fail again. Now, of course, the Supreme Court has already ruled that it is illegal to discriminate against somebody on the basis of their gender identity, their sexual orientation, etc. But this Equality Act will go a little bit further by banning discrimination for all federally funded programs and public accommodations. So this includes private businesses, stores, stadiums, etc. To use a famous example, a bakery would no longer be able to deny its wedding cake services to a same-sex couple based on the owner's religion if the Equality Act passes. Now, I know for some people this may seem as an infringement on their freedom of expression or freedom of religion or whatever, but again, I don't know if your God is real. And I don't know if we should be appealing to some fantastical person in the sky as to how we should treat people here on this material earth. Let me pose a hypothetical for you guys. Let's say I start a religion that says that it's okay to discriminate against women, that they are subservient and that they do not deserve the same rights as men. You cannot prove that my God doesn't exist, and I can't prove that he does. Yet you have to adhere to it. I don't know why, but you just have to, because you have to respect my religious expression or religious freedom, and that supersedes your material rights as a woman. Obviously, this sounds insane, right? But this is literally what's happening. That's literally just a hypothetical with some few words mixed in. Instead of gays, it's women, and that's pretty much it, honestly. They are both using religion as a pretext to oppress other people and to deny them rights. And this bill has been struck down 4 times in the Senate just because of the prevailing influence that religion has on politics and on society as a whole. Your religion should not supersede my rights as a human being. It's as simple as that. So, let's hope it passes and we don't have to continue introducing this bill over and over. But if it doesn't pass, that's the only option that we have moving forward. Because consistency breeds success, right? And you know, I think I've always been on the edge of ascribing some type of moral weight to people's individual religious belief, religious or spiritual. And this was a very recent development actually, because I've always ascribed that type of moral weight or of that moral culpability to people that are religious. And to illustrate the point that I'm trying to make, I'm just going to go ahead and read a tweet from a person that I follow that concisely gets to the point that I'm trying to make. It says, nuclear take. Being religious is strictly a negative quality on any level, not just organized religion. Believing in superstition in one place makes you infinitely more likely to believe it in other places and accept arguments not based in material reality. Lots of smart people are and were religious, but with increasing knowledge comes a burden. As a society, we must cast aside the chains of superstition and live together in the same reality before we can truly be free. This is a tweet by somebody under the handle of Dario Rahim. And I've actually tweeted about this and spoken about this, I think, on the podcast a few episodes back, where I kind of linked religious thinking and religious rationalization, or lack thereof, to QAnon, to crazy-ass conspiracy theories, to the post-truth reality that we live in today that brought us Trump. And of course, a lot of people reject this because their family members are religious or because they themselves are religious, and it causes people to either self-reflect or to assign that moral culpability to people that they love or care for. And believe me, I know this. My parents are religious, and I've had to accept them, but they know that I disagree with things that they believe. And I mean, just the amount of overlap that I've seen of people that hold religious beliefs and are also anti-vaccination or believe in QAnon conspiracy theories. It's staggering, and obviously there's like a little bit of bias there I would ascribe to on my part, but a lot of people have actually written about this, about how religious at its core QAnon was, and just the way that it facilitated a godly figure, which was Trump, the grand savior, and the parallels, I would say, to like Christianity. It's a little cringe and scary at the same time. The crazy part is that I think a lot of people would actually, I don't even know. I was going to say that it would be crazier if people actually accepted the link of religious thinking to QAnon more so than the link of meat consumption to pandemics like the one that we're experiencing nowadays. So, I don't know. I don't think a lot of people, I think we're very reactive to these type of problems when we know what the sources are, yet we are so dead set on our ways of life and our ways of thinking that we are unable to like even grapple with, hey, maybe this thing is bad and maybe we should stop doing it. Not me though. I'm always looking to transform and change and grow. Anyways, the final thing that I wanted to talk about today, which I hope takes up the remaining 10 minutes left that I need to achieve, is the misguided attempt of progressives and leftists to try to blame Democrats for everything that's failing or that fails sometimes, such as the stop on deportations that was actually blocked by a federal judge that was appointed by Trump, such as the possible setback on the increase to the minimum wage, such as the possible setback on the immigration bill that's going to be coming up soon. I understand people's frustration and anger because for some people, the stakes are so real that to have somebody like Biden say one thing and not be able to provide that thing, it causes anger that has to be directed somewhere. But I'm here to offer an alternative. Instead of attacking people that are actually still trying to get these things passed, that are being roadblocked or filibustered by Republicans and conservatives alike, why not try to direct some of that anger and ire to those Republicans and conservatives? Because I've recently had to remind so many people that we live in a democracy. Just because you don't get what you want doesn't mean that the system is necessarily broken. Is it a perfect system? Obviously not. But to try to sit here and pretend that we need a revolution just because there is a large consensus of what immigration should look like in the United States that does not match your ideals does not necessarily mean that democracy is broken or that the Democrats are ineffective. We have to understand that there are people here, as ignorant as they might be, who still have the power to vote. That's democracy for you. For better or worse, this is the best system that we as humans have been able to come up with to facilitate the change that we want to see in the world. And unfortunately, that means that sometimes there will be setbacks in progress. And Biden, or any president for that matter, is not a god. They are not dictators. They can only do so much. For example, if you want police reform, you don't talk to the president about that. You talk to your local elected officials, mainly your mayor, who appoints the sheriff. While it's nice that Biden or anybody else for that matter might give lip service to certain movements, they could only do so much in terms of local policies. Because again, we have the federal state and we have state rights that sometimes compete with each other. The federal level supersedes the state level on some things, and the state level supersedes the federal government on other things. Another factor that we have to consider is that there are going to be Democrats that oppose things like Medicare for All. They don't do this because they fundamentally believe that it's a bad thing or anything like that, or that healthcare isn't a human right. They do this because they understand their constituents. If they come out and put something out like the Green New Deal, like AOC does or other certain progressives that are in very safe blue seats, they would get primaried immediately. They would give more power to Republicans. There are people in America, regular people that are not politicians, that are moderates, that don't want too much change. That's something that I've had to grapple with for a very long time, that I had a very hard time understanding, because I understand things as I knew them, not as other people saw them or perceived them. Take Georgia, for example. No offense, but Georgia is not the most progressive state in the country. The race there was so close that a slip up in rhetoric or anything like that could have cost the Democrats 2 seats in the Senate, which would have prevented us from even being able to, enact the reconciliation budget to pass the COVID relief bill. Reconciliation allows the Democrats to pass a bill with a simple majority as opposed to a supermajority. Had we lost that race, there would be no chance of a COVID relief bill, of an immigration bill, of a $15 minimum wage, or anything else in Biden's agenda. And instead of accepting that, hey, we need to work harder to get these fucking Republicans out of the Senate, people start blaming Democrats and start trying to primary them to replace them with their progressive idols or whatever, which again are going to run into the same problems those moderate Democrats ran into. Had Bernie won the primary and gone to become the president, he would have not been able to pass Medicare for All, I guarantee you. Look how much trouble a so-called moderate like Biden is having to pass basic things. And obviously, I would love to have something like Medicare for All established in the United States because I do think healthcare is a human right. But the truth of the matter is that even though most people do want something that resembles Medicare for All, as soon as you tell people the cost and how much taxes are going to have to increase, a lot of people drop that support. And even then, if we were to establish something like Medicare for All, it would just be so bad in this day and age where our healthcare system is completely messed up. In terms of wait time, in terms of doctors' availability, in terms of drug prices. So there's a lot of things that we still have to fix with our healthcare system before we can even begin to offer this to everybody in America. We firstly need more doctors to be able to keep up with the demand of everybody having expanded healthcare. And that means we necessarily need to be able to educate them. We need to be able to offer college tuition for free or at a reduced price, so more people are incentivized into going to those fields. We also need to work for better pricing on drugs with drug manufacturers, so we're not getting completely ripped off by them. So it's a huge multifaceted approach that we would have to take to enact something that closely resembles Medicare for All now. And I'm not saying it's technically impossible, but with the current state of the Republican Party, it kind of is. So to circle all the way back around, if you genuinely want something like Medicare for All or an expansive immigration bill or anything like that, start directing your ire, your anger to Republicans and get them primaried instead of relentlessly shitting on Democrats. And misguidedly so, I would say. Because that is the only way things are going to change. Stop thinking about short-term solutions that aren't even solutions and start thinking of the larger game at play, the long term. I actually think that it's a Republican strategy to just obfuscate, to mislead, to lie to the public about whose fault it is that no progress is being made because they know that they have nothing to offer. So the only thing that they can continuously do is blame Democrats. And if you want to see how effective this is, how effective the propaganda is, just look around and see how many people just blindly hate Nancy Pelosi. Ask them why, and I guarantee you that they will not have a single answer outside of, oh wow, she didn't pass this one bill, which the Republicans obstructed. To give an example, when the initial $600 first went out, Trump posted a video saying that it was ridiculously low and that we should send the American people $2,000, which obviously the Democrats immediately agreed to. However, when they were initially negotiating that bill, it was the Republicans that were arguing against the $2,000 checks. And Trump posted that video a day after the checks went out. So it was literally just propaganda. And what happened afterwards? Everyone was shitting on the Democrats. Progressives, conservatives, leftists, rightists. It was fucking maddening. But that is the episode for this week. I think I got a little bit closer to the 30-minute mark this week. God, I can't even imagine what it would be like if I had to fill an hour of air. I guess we just need to start, or I need to start thinking of more topics to kind of go over, and just delving into things a little bit more deeply, I would say. But I don't know how boring that is sometimes. I feel like, I don't know, most people, I don't know, I guess I don't even really have an audience yet, so I don't even know why I'm tripping about that. But I feel like smoking some marijuana might help as well. But I've actually quit cold turkey, kind of. I can't even remember when was the last time I smoked. And I kind of like it because now I'm actually having dreams again, which I've heard that suppresses dreams sometimes. Or maybe not dreams so much as like your REM sleep cycles, which are really important for memory and for learning and for a whole bunch of other things. But I've recently noticed that, yeah, my sleep has gotten a lot better and I'm just having a lot more vivid dreams, which is always welcomed, I guess. But I also like that I don't need to depend on weed anymore to function or to go on with my day or to cope with life. So that's always good, I guess. I don't like feeling the need to depend on anything or anyone, but we'll see. I think I'll start again once I'm in Mexico. One thing I forgot to mention as well is that the name of the podcast is probably going to change in the future. I'm not sure to what yet. I might keep Demon for the short term, midterm, and then kind of explore from there, just because I like the name, but at the same time, I feel like when somebody that is English speaking sees it, they might not necessarily understand what it stands for or that it's actually a Spanish word. They might just think it's dime or something like that. So you guys will notice when it happens, if it happens. But for the time being, you can definitely follow us on Podcast Dime on Twitter and everywhere else as Dime Podcast. So that's YouTube, TikTok. What else do we have? Facebook, I think. Oh yeah, Instagram. And you can follow me on Twitter at VictoritoAF. That's A as in apple and F as in flower. That's usually where you guys can contact me if you guys need to get a hold of me, especially because I don't really check my email that we have here on the podcast or any other social media for that matter. Even on my personal Instagram, I hardly go on that. There's nothing there for me right now, I think.